The ice started falling on a Tuesday morning in Fort Worth, Texas, and by Wednesday afternoon, my industrial generator was the only thing keeping 23 people alive. I'm Vincent Walters, and I've been a licensed electrical engineer for 15 years. When I bought the property on Magnolia Ridge Drive 3 years ago, I knew exactly what I was doing. The house sat on 2 acres, just enough space for my workshop, the main residence, and the heavy-duty Caterpillar generator I'd purchased at an equipment auction. That generator wasn't some Home Depot backup unit. It was a 60-kilowatt industrial beast that previously belonged to a data center in Dallas, capable of running for weeks on end if properly maintained. What the HOA didn't know, and what I'd carefully avoided mentioning during my architectural review applications, was that my generator had a secondary purpose. Memorial Heights Hospital sat exactly half a mile from my back property line. 2 years ago, their facilities director, Marcus Chen, had approached me with an unusual proposal. Their emergency wing backup system was aging, and while they worked through the bureaucratic nightmare of permits and city approvals for a new system, would I be willing to serve as a redundant backup power source? They'd pay for the connection, maintain the equipment, and compensate me monthly. I'd agreed, seeing it as both good money and good karma. The connection ran underground through an easement that technically belonged to the city. The hospital had pulled all the permits, done everything by the book. My property insurance knew about it. The city knew about it. But I'd never mentioned it to the Magnolia Ridge HOA because, frankly, it wasn't any of their business. The generator sat behind my workshop, properly screened by the wooden fence I'd built to their exact specifications. It met every noise ordinance. I jumped through every hoop they'd presented. That Wednesday, when the ice storm knocked out power to 60,000 homes across Tarrant County, my generator kicked on automatically. It powered my house, my workshop, and through that underground line, it provided backup power to Memorial Heights Emergency Wing. Not the whole hospital, just the critical care unit where people on ventilators, dialysis machines, and monitoring equipment literally depended on electricity to stay alive. I was in my workshop, monitoring the load and checking fuel levels, when I heard the aggressive knock on my front door. The temperature had dropped to 19 degrees, and the ice made every surface a skating rink. I'd nearly broken my neck twice just getting to the workshop that morning. Through the frosted glass, I could see a shape bundled in a ridiculous white fur coat. My stomach sank. I knew that coat. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that coat. Patricia Brennan, HOA president and self-appointed guardian of property values. I opened the door, and she pushed past me without invitation, trailing ice and indignation into my foyer. "Mr. Walters, we need to discuss your generator situation immediately," she announced, pulling off fur-lined gloves with sharp, practiced movements. Patricia was 52, though she'd probably say 45, with professionally highlighted blonde hair and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. She wore her authority like armor. "Hello, Patricia. Cold enough for you?" I tried to keep my tone neutral. Experience had taught me that engaging with HOA complaints required the patience of a bomb defusal technician. "Don't be glib. I'm here on official HOA business." She pulled out her phone, jabbing at the screen with fingers tipped in French manicure nails. "I've received 17 complaints about your generator noise. 17, Mr. Walters, in less than 24 hours. I glanced out the window at the ice-covered street. "Patricia, we're in the middle of a declared state of emergency. Most of the county is without power. Which is precisely why we need to pull together as a community," she said, her voice taking on that saccharine tone that meant she was about to demand something unreasonable. The community center still has power, running off the backup generator the HOA wisely invested in last year. We're opening it as a warming station for residents, and we need your generator there, today. I blinked. Excuse me, your generator. We need it at the community center. Mrs. Henderson is on oxygen, the Matsudas have a newborn baby, and several elderly residents need reliable heating. The community center's generator can only handle so much load. We need your industrial unit. Patricia, that generator weighs 3,000 pounds. It's hardwired into my electrical system. You can't just wheel it down the street. She waved her hand dismissively. You're an engineer. Figure it out. I've already called Rodriguez Towing. They can transport it. You'll need to disconnect it and reconnect it at the center. The HOA will compensate you for your time, of course. Rodriguez can't get their trucks out in this ice, I said, trying to inject some reality into this conversation. The National Guard is telling people to stay off the roads unless it's life or death. This is life or death, Patricia snapped. Mrs. Henderson could die without her oxygen concentrator. Then Mrs. Henderson should be at a hospital, not at the community center. Patricia's expression hardened. Are you refusing to help your neighbors, Mr. Walters? I'm saying that what you're asking is impossible. My generator is providing power to my home. I have equipment in my workshop that can't lose power. Refrigeration units, climate control systems. I didn't mention the hospital. Something in Patricia's expression made me keep that card close. According to HOA bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 4, all residents must contribute to community welfare during declared emergencies, Patricia recited. Failure to comply can result in fines of up to $500 per day. Patricia, be reasonable. I am being perfectly reasonable. You have a resource the community needs. The HOA has the authority to require its use. I'm trying to be nice about this, Vincent. Don't make me go through official channels. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Marcus Chen from the hospital. Not a text, a call. During an emergency, that meant something was wrong. I need to take this, I said, Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. We're not done discussing this. I answered the call, turning slightly away. Marcus, Vincent, thank God. Are you seeing the load meters on your end? Marcus's voice was tight with stress. I checked 20 minutes ago. Everything was stable. Why? City Power tried to cycle back on, failed, and crashed again. When it did, it caused a surge that took out one of our main backup generators. The other one is handling the hospital, but your line is the only thing keeping the emergency wing stable. We've got 19 patients on life support right now. How's your fuel situation? I walked toward my workshop, leaving Patricia in the foyer. I've got enough diesel for another 48 hours at current load, maybe 60 if I'm careful. The city is saying power restoration could take 3 to 5 days. We're trying to get emergency fuel deliveries, but with the roads like they are, Marcus, I've got a problem. My HOA is demanding I disconnect the generator and move it to their community center. Silence on the other end. Then, they what? The HOA president is in my house right now, threatening fines, saying it's a bylaw violation if I don't comply. Vincent, people will die. You understand that, right? We can't move these patients in this weather. The emergency wing is isolated from the rest of the hospital's backup system because of the construction work on the second floor. Your generator isn't just helpful, it's the only thing standing between these patients and disaster. I understand. I'm not going anywhere, but I need you to do something for me. I need documentation. Something official that says this generator can't be moved. I'll have our hospital administrator call you in 5 minutes, And Vincent, thank you, I mean it. I hung up and walked back to the foyer. Patricia was examining my bookshelf with the critical eye of someone inventorying assets. The answer is no, I said flatly. The generator stays where it is. Patricia turned, her expression shifting from annoyance to anger. Excuse me. You heard me. I'm not moving the generator. It's impossible, dangerous, and frankly, there are circumstances you're not aware of that make it absolutely critical that it remains operational in its current location. What circumstances? Her eyes narrowed. That's not your concern. Everything in this neighborhood is my concern. I'm the HOA president, and I'm a property owner who has complied with every single one of your regulations. That generator is legally installed, properly permitted, and meets all noise ordinances. You have no authority to demand I move it. Patricia's face flushed. The bylaws don't override common sense or safety regulations. Even if I wanted to help, moving an operating 60-kilowatt generator during an ice storm would be criminally negligent. She pulled herself up to her full height, which was impressive given she was wearing 4-inch heeled boots in an ice storm. Fine. If you won't do this voluntarily, the HOA board will vote on emergency measures. We're meeting tonight at 7. I suggest you attend. Where? The community center doesn't have internet for a Zoom call. In person, we have candles. Patricia, the roads are impassable. Then you better leave early. She pulled her gloves back on with sharp, aggressive movements. This isn't over, Mr. Walters. You're choosing to be difficult during a community crisis. People will remember that. She stalked out, nearly slipping on my front steps. I watched her navigate to her enormous white Escalade, which somehow had chains on the tires already. Of course she did. Patricia Brennan prepared for emergencies like a prepper preparing for the apocalypse, but only if the apocalypse might inconvenience her personally. My phone rang again. The hospital administrator, Jennifer Kowalski, identified herself and laid out the situation in crisp, professional terms. She emailed me a formal letter within 2 minutes, stating that the generator at my residence was currently providing life-sustaining power to critical care patients and could not be disconnected without causing immediate threat to human life. She copied the hospital's legal counsel, the city's emergency management coordinator, and for good measure, a district judge who apparently owed the hospital's chief of surgery a favor. I forwarded the email to Patricia. She responded in 4 words, "Board meeting, tonight, 7. The afternoon crawled by. I monitored the generator, checked fuel consumption, and made calls to 3 different diesel suppliers. 2 weren't operating due to the storm. The 3rd had trucks running emergency routes only and put me on a waiting list. I gave them the hospital's account number, and suddenly, my priority level jumped significantly. They promised a delivery within 24 hours. Around 4, my neighbor Greg Morrison managed to slide across the ice between our properties. Greg was an accountant, 60 years old and one of the few reasonable people on the street. "Vince, what the hell is going on?" he asked, accepting the coffee I offered. "Patricia's been calling everyone, saying you're refusing to help the community. She wants me to disconnect my generator and move it to the community center." Greg's eyebrows shot up. "Move it? That thing is the size of a car, bigger, actually. That's insane. How would you even—" He stopped. "Wait, is this about the noise complaints?" Because honestly, I can barely hear it from my place and I'm right next door. 17 complaints, apparently. 17. There are only 23 houses in the HOA. Who, understanding, dawned on his face. She called everyone and told them to complain, didn't she? That would be my guess. Greg shook his head. She did the same thing to the Hendersons when they wanted to paint their house gray instead of beige. Suddenly, everyone was concerned about property values. Patricia wanted them fined until they repainted. What happened? Henderson's a lawyer. He threatened to sue for harassment. Patricia backed down but made their lives hell for 6 months. Little violations, constant inspections. They almost moved. Good to know what I'm up against. This board meeting tonight, Greg said carefully. Patricia's going to push for a fine, a big one. She'll have the votes, too. Cynthia Wagner follows her around like a puppy, and Tom Delgado won't vote against her because his wife is friends with Patricia's sister. The hospital sent me documentation. The generator is literally keeping people alive. You should bring that. Get everything documented. Patricia hates publicity and she hates being wrong. If you can prove she's putting people in danger, she might back down. Might, not would, not definitely. Might. Greg left around 5 and I spent the next hour preparing. I printed the hospital's letter on my backup battery-powered printer. I gathered my property permits, my original HOA architectural approval, noise ordinance compliance documents, and the contract with the hospital showing the emergency power arrangement. I created a simple 1-page summary explaining that the generator was currently supplying life-sustaining power to 19 critical care patients at Memorial Heights Hospital. At 6:30, I bundled up and started the treacherous journey to the community center. What should have been a 5-minute drive took 20 minutes of careful crawling at 10 miles per hour. The community center parking lot looked like a disaster movie set. Ice covered everything, and the only light came from the building's windows and a few emergency vehicles parked at odd angles. Emergency vehicles. I parked and made my way inside, wondering what fresh disaster had occurred. The community center was warmer than outside, but not by much. The backup generator Patricia had bragged about was clearly struggling. About 40 people clustered in the main room, wrapped in blankets, looking miserable. Patricia stood near the front, talking to a police officer. Not good. I recognized Officer James Sullivan, a 15-year veteran who'd spoken at a neighborhood watch meeting last year. He looked tired and deeply annoyed. "Mr. Walters," Patricia called out, spotting me. "How kind of you to join us. Officer Sullivan, this is the man I was telling you about." Sullivan turned to me, and I saw the resignation in his eyes. He knew what kind of call this was. "Sir, I understand you have a generator that the HOA is requesting access to." His tone made it clear he thought this was a waste of his time. "Officer, I'm happy to explain the situation." I held up my folder of documents. My generator is currently providing emergency backup power to Memorial Heights Hospital's critical care wing. It's hardwired into their system and cannot be disconnected without potentially fatal consequences to 19 patients. Sullivan's demeanor changed immediately. "The hospital?" "Memorial Heights. Yes, sir, I have documentation from the hospital administrator." I handed him the letter. He read it, his expression growing darker. He turned to Patricia. "Madam, did you know about this?" "He never mentioned any hospital," Patricia said quickly. "This is the first I'm hearing of it." "I sent you the email from the hospital administrator at noon," I said evenly, "with documentation. I've been busy managing this emergency shelter. I haven't had time to read every email." Sullivan looked between us. "Madam, this generator is supporting life-saving medical equipment. There's no way the city would authorize its removal, even temporarily." "But we have residents here who need power," Patricia insisted. "Elderly people, a baby. And if they need medical attention, we'll transport them to a hospital," Sullivan said. "Look, I understand this is a difficult situation, but we can't redirect emergency medical equipment for comfort purposes, even in a crisis." Patricia's face went red. "Comfort purposes. These are our neighbors. And I'm sure Mr. Walters would help if he could, but what you're asking is impossible. Sullivan handed me back my documents. Sir, is the generator stable? Do you need any support from emergency services? I have a fuel delivery scheduled for tomorrow. As long as that comes through, we can maintain power indefinitely. Good. If you have any issues, call emergency services and reference this interaction. We'll make sure you get priority response. He turned back to Patricia. Madam, I strongly suggest you withdraw this complaint. If you continue to harass this gentleman about equipment that's supporting medical operations, that could constitute interference with emergency services. Patricia opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes fixed on me with undisguised hatred. Sullivan left and the room erupted in whispers. I could feel the weight of 40 pairs of eyes on me, some sympathetic, some hostile, most just confused. Well, Patricia said loudly, her voice cutting through the murmurs, I suppose we now know where Mr. Walters' priorities lie. His equipment is more important than his neighbors. Patricia, that's not fair, Greg Morrison said from somewhere in the crowd. The man is keeping hospital patients alive, so he claims. I'd like to see this supposed documentation. I held up the folder. Hospital administrator's letter, signed and dated. Their legal counsel's contact information, emergency services confirmation, it's all here. Anyone who wants to see it is welcome to. An elderly woman I didn't recognize spoke up. Is Mrs. Henderson here? The one who needs oxygen? A younger woman raised her hand. I'm her daughter. Mom's actually at the hospital. They admitted her yesterday when her oxygen levels dropped. She's in the emergency wing there. The silence that followed was deafening. At Memorial Heights, I asked. Yes, the emergency wing. The nurse said they'd had power problems, but everything was stable now thanks to some backup system. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The connections were being made throughout the room. Patricia's face had gone from red to white. That's quite a coincidence. It's not a coincidence, the daughter said. That's my mother's life you're talking about. If the power goes out in that wing, her voice broke. Patricia recovered quickly, like she always did. Of course, I didn't realize. This is wonderful news, actually. Vincent has been supporting the hospital all along. I think we all owe him our thanks. The sudden pivot was so sharp it gave me whiplash. Several people in the room looked equally stunned. However, Patricia continued, because there was always a however, we still have the issue of the HOA bylaws. The board meeting needs to address the generator noise complaints and discuss proper notification procedures for major equipment installations. The generator was properly permitted, I said. I have all the architectural review approvals, but you didn't disclose its connection to the hospital. Because the HOA has no jurisdiction over what I do with my electrical systems as long as it meets code. The city inspected and approved everything. Patricia's smile was brittle. Nevertheless, the board will meet and discuss the matter. That's our responsibility as HOA leadership. The meeting was a farce. Patricia had clearly lost the room, but she went through the motions anyway, desperate to maintain some illusion of control. The board consisted of Patricia, Cynthia Wagner, a timid woman in her 40s who nodded at everything Patricia said, and Tom Delgado, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. They called the meeting to order at 7:15. Only about 15 people stayed for the actual proceedings. Everyone else had shuffled off to claim sleeping spots or check on family members. Patricia read the complaint. 17 noise violations. Failure to notify the HOA of major equipment usage. Unauthorized commercial activity on residential property. That last one made me laugh out loud. Commercial activity. I have a contract with the hospital, yes, but it's a service agreement, not a business. I'm not running a power company out of my garage. You're receiving payment, Patricia said. That's commercial activity. By that logic, everyone who works from home is running a commercial operation. That's absurd. Tom Delgado cleared his throat. Patricia, I think we might be overreaching here. The man's got all his permits, the city approved everything, and he's literally keeping people alive. Maybe we should just drop this. We have 17 complaints on file, Patricia insisted. Which you solicited, I said. Let's be honest about what happened here. You decided you wanted my generator for the community center. When I said no, you called everyone in the neighborhood and told them to file noise complaints. That's a serious accusation. Then let's look at the timing. All 17 complaints were filed between 9 and 11 this morning, all using nearly identical language. All filed through the online portal within minutes of each other. Patricia's jaw tightened. Residents are allowed to file complaints. Residents are also allowed to file complaints about harassment from HOA board members. Would you like me to start that process? The room temperature seemed to drop. Cynthia Wagner actually leaned away from Patricia slightly, as if the situation might become radioactive. I think, Greg Morrison said from the audience, that we're all stressed and cold and scared. Maybe this isn't the time for HOA enforcement actions. We're in a state of emergency. The governor declared it. Maybe we should be focusing on getting through the next few days rather than fighting about generator noise that, frankly, I can't even hear from my house. Several people nodded. Tom Delgado looked relieved. Patricia was boxed in and she knew it. But Patricia Brennan didn't get to be HOA president by giving up easily. Fine, she said crisply. We'll table the noise complaints until the emergency is over, but the issue of proper disclosure remains. The board will need to review whether Mr. Walters violated notification requirements when he installed the hospital connection. There are no notification requirements for electrical work that's already been permitted and inspected by the city, I said. That's a matter of interpretation. No, it's a matter of reading the bylaws. Section 8, Paragraph 2. HOA approval is required for exterior modifications and structures. The hospital connection is underground and invisible. No exterior modification occurred. Patricia pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. Her expression suggested she was realizing I was right but would never admit it. We'll take this under advisement, she finally said. Meeting adjourned. People dispersed quickly, eager to escape the tension. Greg caught my arm as I headed for the door. Watch your back, he said quietly. Patricia doesn't forget, and she doesn't forgive. I'm not worried about Patricia. You should be. She got the Johnsons kicked out of the neighborhood 3 years ago, found some arcane bylaw about external satellite dishes, made their lives so miserable they sold at a loss just to get away. I'll be careful. I made it home around 9, exhausted and cold. The house was warm, the workshop was stable, and the generator hummed along steadily in the backyard. I checked the fuel levels again. Still good for another 36 hours. My phone rang. Marcus from the hospital. Vincent, I heard there was some excitement at your HOA meeting. News travels fast. Sullivan's wife works in our administrative department. He mentioned the situation. I wanted to thank you and apologize. If I'd known this would cause you problems with your neighborhood, Marcus, you've got 19 people on life support. I think I can handle my HOA. Still, if there's anything we can do, legal support, documentation, whatever you need. Just keep those patients alive. That's all I need. I hung up and made myself dinner. A can of soup heated on the gas stove. The ice continued to fall outside, coating everything in another layer of crystalline weight. Tree branches bowed under the load. Power lines sagged dangerously. The next morning brought news that power restoration would take even longer than predicted. The ice had caused catastrophic damage to the electrical grid. Some areas might be without power for a week or more. The governor activated the National Guard. FEMA was setting up emergency shelters. And my diesel delivery was delayed. The fuel company called at 8 a.m. Their trucks couldn't get through on several major roads. They were working with the city to clear routes, but it might be another 12 to 24 hours. I did the math. At current consumption rates, I had maybe 30 hours of fuel left. Less if the load increased. I called Marcus. He'd already heard. The hospital was working on emergency fuel procurement through the National Guard, but prioritization was a nightmare. Hospitals across the city were running low. Memorial Heights wasn't even at the top of the list because their main backup systems were functioning. The emergency wing was considered a secondary concern. "Can you reduce the load?" I asked. "Shut down anything non-essential. We already have. The equipment in that wing is all life support. There's nothing we can turn off without killing someone." I spent the morning optimizing everything I could. I shut down my own house's heating except for one room, minimized power consumption in the workshop, and carefully adjusted the generator's load to maximize fuel efficiency. At noon, Patricia showed up again. This time she brought company. Cynthia Wagner and two men I didn't recognize, both wearing official-looking jackets. "Mr. Walters, these gentlemen are from the city's building inspection department," Patricia announced. "They're here to inspect your generator installation." One of the men, young and clearly uncomfortable, spoke up. "Sir, we received a complaint about unpermitted electrical work. We need to verify your permits and inspect the installation." I kept my expression neutral. "Everything was permitted and inspected 2 years ago. I have all the documentation. We'd still like to verify the current state of the installation." In the middle of an ice storm, while the generator is running emergency operations, the inspector shifted his weight. "Madam, you said this was an immediate safety concern. This doesn't look like. The concern is that unpermitted work is supplying power to a hospital," Patricia interrupted. "That seems like something the city would want to verify." I pulled out my phone and called Jennifer Kowalski at the hospital. "Jennifer, I have city building inspectors at my home demanding to inspect the generator while it's running. Can you help?" She could. Within 10 minutes, I had the city's emergency management coordinator on speakerphone, explaining in very clear terms that any interruption to the generator's operation could constitute interference with emergency medical services. The inspectors could review the permits, but physical inspection would need to wait until the emergency was over. The two inspectors looked relieved. They asked to see my permits, checked them against their records, and confirmed everything was in order. They left, one of them giving Patricia a look that suggested he knew exactly what kind of game she was playing. Patricia stayed behind. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You made me look foolish in front of the entire neighborhood. You did that yourself. I've been protecting property values in this neighborhood for 8 years. 8 years of keeping out the trash, maintaining standards, ensuring everyone follows the rules. And then you move in with your workshop and your industrial equipment and your attitude, thinking the rules don't apply to you. The rules do apply to me. I've followed every single one. You found loopholes. I followed the bylaws as written. That's not a loophole, Patricia. That's just following the rules you created." Her eyes were cold. "There are a lot of rules, Vincent. Hundreds of pages of bylaws. I wonder what else we might find if we look carefully enough. How tall is your fence? Is it exactly 6 feet? Not 6 feet and 1 inch? What about your workshop's exterior paint? Does it exactly match your house? What about those solar panels on your roof? Were they approved? What about your landscaping? Are you maintaining the grass to regulation height? Are you threatening to harass me? I'm explaining how the HOA works. We have standards. We enforce them. Everyone gets treated equally. Equally would mean you inspect everyone's properties this thoroughly. We inspect properties that receive complaints. Ah, and I'm sure complaints could be arranged. She smiled, and it was genuinely chilling. Complaints happen when residents have concerns. I can't control what people are concerned about. She left, and I stood in my doorway feeling like I'd just been threatened by a mob boss. Which, in a way, I had. HOA presidents with too much power and too little oversight operated like petty dictators, and Patricia Brennan had perfected the role. The afternoon brought two developments. First, the fuel delivery got delayed again. 24 hours, maybe more. Second, my generator's fuel gauge showed I had about 20 hours left at current consumption. We were going to run out. I called Marcus and explained the situation. He went silent for a long moment. "Can you get fuel anywhere else?" he asked. "Every supplier in the region is maxed out." The National Guard is prioritizing main hospitals, emergency services, and shelters. I'm on waiting lists with 3 different companies. What if we reduce load even more? There's nothing left to reduce. You're already running the absolute minimum. Another silence. I could hear someone talking in the background, urgent and worried. "Vincent, I need to be straight with you. If we lose power, we'll have about 30 minutes to transfer patients before they start dying. In this weather, with the roads like they are, we can't move them safely. Even if we could, the other hospitals are already over capacity with their own emergencies." I understand. I'm going to escalate this to the State Emergency Management Office. If I call in favors and make enough noise, maybe we can get priority fuel delivery. Do whatever you need to do. I spent the next hour checking every possible fuel source. Private companies, construction firms, anyone who might have diesel. Nothing. The ice storm had created a perfect storm of problems. High demand, impossible delivery conditions, and bureaucratic bottlenecks. At 4 p.m., my neighbor Greg knocked on my door. "Vince, you need to see this." He led me outside and pointed down the street. A local news van was parked at the community center, satellite dish deployed. A reporter was interviewing Patricia. "Oh no," I muttered. "Oh yes. She's telling everyone about the generator situation, making herself look like a hero for trying to get power to the community center." We watched from a distance as Patricia gestured dramatically, her white fur coat gleaming in the gray afternoon light. The reporter nodded sympathetically, taking notes. My phone rang. "Unknown number. Mr. Walters. This is Amanda Zhang from Caxis News. I'm doing a story about the ice storm and community response. I understand you have a generator that the HOA requested be used at a community shelter, but you refused. Would you like to comment?" "Where did you hear that?" Patricia Brennan, the HOA president, reached out to us. "She said you were prioritizing your personal comfort over community welfare." I took a deep breath. That's not accurate. My generator is currently supplying emergency backup power to Memorial Heights Hospital's critical care wing. It's supporting 19 patients on life support. I have documentation from the hospital administrator if you'd like to verify. Silence. Then, the hospital. Why would your personal generator be connected to a hospital? I explained the arrangement, the permits, the emergency power system. Amanda Zhang's questions became sharper, more interested. "So the HOA president tried to force you to disconnect life support equipment?" She didn't know about the hospital connection initially, though I did send her documentation. "Did she continue demanding you disconnect after learning about the hospital?" I hesitated. "Technically, Patricia had backed off the immediate demand. But the harassment, the building inspectors, the implied threats. Miss Zhang, I think you should ask Mrs. Brennan what her priorities are. I've been focused on keeping people alive. She's been focused on HOA bylaws. The interview lasted 20 minutes. Amanda Zhang was thorough, professional, and clearly smelled a bigger story than just ice storm inconvenience. That evening's news made Patricia Brennan locally famous for all the wrong reasons. The story ran at 6 and again at 10. HOA president tried to force man to disconnect hospital life support. They showed Patricia's interview at the community center, talking about community needs and selfish residents. Then they cut to their interview with me, showing my permits and the hospital documentation. Then they interviewed Jennifer Kowalski from the hospital, who confirmed that 19 patients were currently alive thanks to my generator. The reporter's summary was devastating. While residents face legitimate hardships from this unprecedented ice storm, one HOA president's attempt to requisition private equipment nearly resulted in catastrophic consequences for critical care patients. They even got a statement from Officer Sullivan, who confirmed he'd responded to a call about the generator and found no wrongdoing. My phone exploded with calls and texts. Neighbors expressing support. News outlets wanting interviews. A lawyer offering to represent me pro bono if the HOA took action. Someone from the city council's office asking if I needed assistance. And one text from Patricia. You'll regret this. The fuel situation reached crisis point at midnight. 18 hours of fuel remaining. The National Guard finally responded to the hospital's escalation, but their fuel convoy was stuck in Denton, 30 miles north, unable to navigate the ice-covered highways. Marcus called every hour with updates. They were preparing for evacuation, even though it was nearly impossible. Ambulances were chained up and ready. They'd contacted every hospital within 50 miles about taking patients, but everyone knew the truth. Moving people on ventilators and dialysis machines through an ice storm was a death sentence. At 2 a.m., I was in my workshop, staring at fuel consumption charts and trying to figure out if there was any way to stretch the remaining diesel, when my security camera alert pinged. Someone was in my backyard. Multiple someones. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone. 4 figures, bundled in dark clothing, moving around the generator. One of them was doing something to the fuel line. I grabbed my phone and my heavy-duty flashlight and ran outside. Hey, what the hell are you doing? The figures spun around. 3 men I didn't recognize and 1 woman. The flashlight beam caught her face. Patricia, Mr. Walters, go back inside, she said. This doesn't concern you. That's my generator, my property. It absolutely concerns me. One of the men stepped forward. He was big, wearing a contractor's jacket. Sir, we're just conducting an HOA inspection. Madam Brennan has concerns about safety violations. At 2 in the morning, while the generator is running emergency operations, safety violations need to be addressed immediately, Patricia said. Her voice was different, higher, almost manic. The HOA has a responsibility. If this equipment is dangerous, we need to shut it down. I looked at the fuel line. Someone had loosened the connection. Diesel was dripping onto the ground. You're sabotaging it, I said, my voice flat with disbelief. You're actually trying to sabotage hospital equipment. Don't be dramatic. We're conducting an inspection. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Patricia's eyes widened. What are you doing? Calling the police. You're tampering with medical equipment. That's a crime. One of the men grabbed for my phone. I stepped back and he slipped on the ice, going down hard. The other 2 men looked at each other, then at Patricia, clearly realizing this situation was spiraling. Madam, I don't think one started. Stay where you are, Patricia snapped. He's bluffing. 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was clear in the cold air. This is Vincent Walters at 4782 Magnolia Ridge Drive. I have 4 people on my property attempting to sabotage a generator that's providing emergency power to Memorial Heights Hospital. I need police response immediately. Sir, can you confirm that hospital equipment is being tampered with? Yes. The fuel line has been deliberately loosened. Diesel fuel is leaking. Officers are being dispatched. Stay on the line and maintain a safe distance. Patricia's face had gone from angry to pale. Vincent, let's be reasonable. We can work this out. You tried to kill people. 19 people on life support. I didn't. That's not what we were just inspecting. You loosened the fuel line in the middle of the night, while the generator is running critical medical equipment. One of the men with her suddenly seemed to fully understand the situation. Jesus Christ, lady, you said this was about property values. You didn't say anything about a hospital. Shut up, Patricia hissed. No, I'm not going to shut up. I'm not going to jail because you're having a power trip. He looked at me. Sir, I'm a contractor. She hired me and my guys to do an equipment inspection. She paid cash. We didn't know about any hospital. The second contractor nodded vigorously. Same here. We thought this was about HOA violations, building code stuff. The third man, the one who'd slipped, was still on the ground looking dazed. Patricia looked around at her collapsing conspiracy. You're all cowards. This was about protecting the community, about enforcing standards, about showing that no one is above the rules. The rules don't include attempted murder, I said. Sirens approached, which was remarkable given the road conditions. Apparently, tampering with hospital equipment got you priority response even in an ice storm. 2 police cars slid into my driveway, lights painting the ice in red and blue. 4 officers emerged, hands on weapons until they assessed the situation. Officer Sullivan was one of them. He looked at the scene, looked at Patricia, and shook his head wearily. Mrs. Brennan, what did you do? I was conducting an HOA inspection, she said, her voice regaining some of its authority. This man has been violating bylaws, and as HOA president, you tampered with medical equipment, Sullivan interrupted. He walked over to the generator, examined the loosened fuel line, and turned to one of the other officers. Get photos of this. Document everything. Officer, this is a misunderstanding, Patricia tried. Madam, I'm going to need you to be quiet. Sullivan looked at the 3 contractors. You 3. IDs out. Someone explain what happened here. The contractors fell over themselves explaining. Patricia had approached them at the community center, offered cash for an emergency inspection of HOA property. She'd said the generator was a code violation, possibly dangerous, and needed to be shut down for public safety. Did she tell you to tamper with the fuel line? Sullivan asked. She said to make sure it couldn't operate until proper inspections were completed, the first contractor said. I thought she meant tag it out or something. When she told me to loosen that connection, I started getting worried. But you did it anyway. She paid us $500 each, and she's on the city council members' Christmas card list. She made sure to mention that. Sullivan turned to me. Mr. Walters, walk me through what you observed. I explained everything. The security camera alert, coming outside, finding them tampering with the fuel line, calling 911. I need to see that security footage, Sullivan said. I pulled it up on my phone. The video was clear enough. Patricia directing the contractors, pointing at the fuel line, one of them loosening the connection while she watched. Sullivan watched it twice. Then he walked back to Patricia. Patricia Brennan, you're under arrest for criminal mischief, tampering with medical equipment, and conspiracy to commit reckless endangerment. You can't be serious, Patricia said, but her voice had lost its power. She sounded shocked, disbelieving. "Madam, you attempted to disable equipment that's keeping people alive. Yes, I'm serious." They handcuffed her. Patricia tried to protest, then to negotiate, then to threaten. She name-dropped the city council member, a state representative, someone's husband who was a lawyer. The officers were polite, but unmoved. The contractors were detained for questioning, but not arrested. Sullivan seemed to believe their story that they'd been duped by Patricia. An officer from the sheriff's department arrived, apparently called in because of the hospital connection. She took statements from everyone, photographed the generator and the damaged fuel line, and collected the security footage. Marcus called while I was giving my statement. "Vincent, our monitoring system showed a pressure drop in the fuel line. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. We had some vandalism, but the police are here." "How's the generator?" "Still running, but if that leak isn't fixed soon, you'll lose pressure and the engine will shut down." "I'll fix it now. Give me 10 minutes. I had to convince the police to let me repair the fuel line while they documented the scene. They eventually agreed, with an officer standing over me taking photos while I worked. The repair took 20 minutes. The connection had been loosened but not damaged. I tightened it, cleaned up the spilled diesel, and checked all the other connections to make sure nothing else had been tampered with. The generator continued its steady hum. Marcus called back. "We're stable again. Thank you. I heard what happened. Is Patricia Brennan really under arrest?" "Yes." "Good. I hope they throw the book at her." The police cleared out around 4 a.m. Sullivan stayed behind, sipping coffee in my workshop while I monitored the generator. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry," he said. "HOA complaints are usually petty nonsense. I never thought someone would actually try something like this." "Will the charges stick?" "Probably. We have video evidence, multiple witnesses, clear intent, and documented harm. The DA's going to love this case. Attempted sabotage of hospital equipment during a declared emergency." "Yeah, the charges will stick." "What happens to the HOA?" "That's above my pay grade, but I guess the board will need to hold new elections. Patricia's done." The eastern sky was starting to lighten when Sullivan finally left. I sat in my workshop, exhausted, watching the generator's steady operation. At 7 a.m., the National Guard fuel convoy finally made it through from Denton. 2 massive fuel tankers, escorted by military vehicles with chains on their tires. They filled my generator's tank, gave me enough extra fuel for another week if needed, and left to continue their delivery route. The crisis was over. Power started coming back to neighborhoods throughout Fort Worth over the next 2 days. My street got power back Friday afternoon. The ice began to melt Saturday. By Sunday, the roads were mostly clear and life was returning to normal. The hospital kept 19 patients alive through the entire crisis. No deaths in the emergency wing. Marcus invited me to visit, and I met some of the people who'd been on the other end of that power cable. A grandmother on a ventilator, a teenager who needed dialysis 3 times a week, a middle-aged man recovering from heart surgery. They thanked me. Their families thanked me. I felt uncomfortable with the attention, but Marcus insisted. "You saved their lives," he said simply. "Let them say thank you." The legal consequences for Patricia came fast. She was charged with criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and interference with emergency services. The fact that it happened during a declared state of emergency enhanced the charges significantly. Her lawyer tried to negotiate, but the DA's office was getting pressure from multiple directions. The hospital wanted justice. The news coverage had made it a public issue. And the city's emergency management office was furious that someone had deliberately endangered critical infrastructure during a crisis. Patricia ended up taking a plea deal. Guilty to criminal mischief and reckless endangerment. 2 years probation, 200 hours community service, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Texas. Plus restitution to cover the police response, the damage to my property, and a donation to the hospital. The HOA held emergency elections. Greg Morrison became the new president. His first act was to formally apologize to me on behalf of the association. His second was to revise the bylaws to limit the president's power and add oversight provisions. The story made national news for about a week. HOA president arrested for sabotaging hospital equipment. I gave a few interviews, then stopped when it became clear that every news outlet wanted the same dramatic retelling. The hospital paid me a bonus that year, a substantial one. They also fast-tracked their new backup generator installation, though they kept my connection as a permanent redundant system. I got letters and emails from people all over the country sharing their own HOA horror stories. Apparently, Patricia wasn't unique. There were thousands of petty tyrants across America, wielding bylaws like weapons, making people's lives miserable over painted mailboxes and lawn gnome violations. But most of them stopped short of attempted murder. 6 months later, on a warm June afternoon, I was working in my garage when a car pulled up. An older woman got out, walking with a cane. I recognized her from the hospital, the grandmother who'd been on the ventilator. "Mr. Walters." "Yes, madam. I'm Dorothy Henderson. I wanted to thank you properly. Without your generator, I wouldn't be here to meet my great-granddaughter." She gestured to the car where a younger woman was unbuckling a baby carrier. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do, and I wanted you to know something." Patricia Brennan called my daughter during that storm, trying to get us to file a complaint about your generator noise. She said it was keeping the whole neighborhood awake. She was very persuasive. "What did you say?" I told her to go to hell. I couldn't hear any generator from the hospital, and I had bigger problems to worry about. She smiled. Later, when I found out that same generator was keeping me alive, I felt pretty good about that conversation. We talked for a few more minutes. She showed me pictures of the new great-granddaughter, told me about her recovery, and thanked me 3 more times before leaving. That evening, sitting on my back porch with a beer, listening to the generator's quiet hum, I thought about power. Not the electrical kind, but the other kind. The power Patricia had wielded so carelessly. The power to make people miserable over minor violations. The power to bully and threaten and manipulate, and I thought about the fragility of that power. How quickly it had collapsed when confronted with actual consequences. How thoroughly her authority had evaporated when people realized what she'd done. HOAs exist, theoretically, to protect property values and maintain community standards. But too often they become vehicles for petty tyranny, giving small-minded people an opportunity to feel important by making others feel small. Patricia had been HOA president for 8 years. 8 years of enforcement and violations and fines. How many people had she made miserable? How many families had considered moving because of her harassment, but in the end, she'd gone too far. She'd crossed the line from petty tyranny to actual crime, and the system, slow and imperfect as it was, had stopped her. My phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. "How's the backup power business treating you?" Quiet. "Which is how I like it." "Good. Because I'm recommending you to 3 other hospitals in the DFW area. They're all interested in redundant backup systems." "Interested?" I looked at the generator humming steadily in my backyard. At the underground cable connecting my property to the hospital. At the setup that had saved 19 lives during the worst ice storm in Texas history. "Yeah," I texted back. "I'm interested." The generator purred on into the evening, a steady, reliable sound. Insurance against disaster. Protection against chaos. Power when it mattered most. And somewhere in Tarrant County, Patricia Brennan was probably reading through HOA bylaws, looking for violations she could no longer enforce. I raised my beer toward the generator in a silent toast. Some battles you win not by fighting back, but by simply doing the right thing and letting the chips fall where they may. The ice storm became known as the Memorial Day ice storm, even though it happened in February. The city spent months analyzing what went wrong with the power grid and what went right with emergency response. My generator setup became a case study in redundant power systems and was mentioned in several emergency preparedness reports. I got a commendation from the city council, which was ironic since Patricia had name-dropped a council member during her arrest. The council member in question made a public statement distancing himself from Patricia and praising community members who went above and beyond during the crisis. Greg Morrison turned out to be an excellent HOA president. The neighborhood became noticeably more relaxed. Petty complaints dried up. The board focused on actual community improvements rather than enforcement actions. But the best part came a year later. The Hendersons, the family who'd almost moved away because of Patricia's harassment, decided to stay. They painted their house a lovely shade of gray. The HOA approved it without comment, and Dorothy Henderson, the grandmother I'd helped keep alive, started a campaign to change Texas HOA laws. She testified before the state legislature about the need for oversight and accountability. She told her story about the ice storm, the generator, and the HOA president who tried to shut it down. The legislature passed a new law requiring HOA board members to undergo training and creating an ombudsman system for resolving disputes. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Dorothy called me when the bill passed. "We did it, Vincent. You did it. I just kept a generator running. You saved lives. I made sure people knew about it. Same team." I couldn't argue with that. The generator still runs, a quiet presence in my backyard. I maintain it religiously, test it monthly, and keep meticulous fuel records. It's connected not just to one hospital now, but to 3, providing redundant backup power across the DFW medical system. And every time I check the connections, tighten the fuel lines, and verify the load balance, I think about Patricia Brennan and her 17 noise complaints. I think about how close it came to disaster, how 19 people nearly died because one person couldn't stand not being in control, and I think about the lesson I learned during that frozen February week. The most dangerous people aren't the ones with bad intentions. They're the ones with a little bit of power and the absolute certainty that they're right. The generator hums on, steady and reliable, keeping the lights on when everything else fails. And that's enough for me.